Well, now that we're in that in-between season between Halloween and Christmas, I figure it's time I talked about a movie that I feel like has been unfortunately forgotten and kind of maligned over the years after it came out. A movie that's really funny, but nobody ever talks about. So I'm going to talk about it today. Get Smart. Now, Get Smart is a spy comedy movie based on the comedy spy show from the 60s of the same name. And we've had parodies of spy movies forever. Austin Powers is probably the most famous example of it. And even back in the 60s, Get Smart was a Mel Brooks style parody of the spy genre, and we've had a bunch of other ones since. Some of them are great, some of them are kind of forgettable, but Get Smart really is a favorite of mine in this genre because it does a few things really well. For one, it is a great update from the 60s show. It has a lot of the same gags, a lot of references to that old show, so that always makes me happy when there's a clear continuity to it. All the actors do a phenomenal job. Steve Carell is great as Maxwell Smart, and likewise Anne Hathaway is great as Agent 99. And Anne Hathaway is one of those actresses that always brings it to whatever role she's in. She's not an actress I always think of when I think of really good leading ladies in the movies, but whenever she's in a movie, she's usually one of the best parts of that movie. She never phones in a performance. What really sets this movie apart, and I think is why the TV show was so successful back in the day, is because it doesn't feel like it's just copy and pasting aspects from other spy stuff. This does not feel like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. It doesn't feel like James Bond. It doesn't feel like Mission Impossible. This is clearly its own universe, its own world. And it's a little hard for me to separate how much of this movie works because it's in the movie and how much of it is just a holdover from the TV show, because the TV show had a really original premise. It had its own control organization fighting the agents of chaos, and yeah, that sounds really cheesy, but when you update it in 2008 with a little bit more sleeker production design, it actually looks really cool, and you really feel like you understand how this organization works, how they're fighting these terrorists. It's almost got kind of a Men in Black vibe to it, because in Men in Black you also had this kind of secret espionage organization of sorts. It was more alien focused, but it was so well developed and well realized that you immediately got everything that they're about, how it works. And it's the same thing here with Get Smart, and that's not something you usually get out of these kind of spy comedies. Usually it's either like Austin Powers, where it's a copy and paste of a specific James Bond movie or James Bond franchise, or you get a very generic, could be any organization, spy network that feels like they didn't really pay attention to the actual world building of this story. But Get Smart puts so much thought and care into this world building that you just love every minute of it. You just feel kind of at home watching these characters interact. Nothing feels out of place. And because of that, a lot of the praise of this movie should go to Mel Brooks, who came up with the idea of Get Smart. His name is actually on the credits, so I kind of look at this movie as another unofficial Mel Brooks movie, because the Mel Brooks fingerprints in the comedy and the writing and the characters is all there. And something about Mel Brooks' parodies, whenever he's spoofing a genre, he always builds his own world to make it not just stand as a parody of something else, but make it its own interesting narrative, its own interesting world and interpretation that you enjoy seeing for what it is, just as a standalone movie. And that's what Get Smart is. It's not only hilariously funny with great jokes and great character moments, but it feels like its own standalone universe, standalone story in its own right. But let's get into the story of Get Smart, because we follow Maxwell Smart. He's an analyst at Control. He's a pencil pusher. He's not out there in the field doing the crazy spy stuff. That is delegated to agents like The Rock in this movie. Yeah, he's in this, in an era where The Rock was a lot more comfortable with self-deprecating jokes and humor. He's actually very funny. He's a great comedic actor, and he's done a few really funny comedies, but it seems like lately he's gotten very self-serious. I think he might have gotten too much fame too quickly, because for me, I love The Rock in this movie. It's a great balance of action and comedy, but Steve Carell is not that. He's just behind a desk, and he wants to be an agent desperately, but he does such a good job at what he does now, they can't promote him because then they'll lose their best analyst. So it's not looking too good until a surprise attack on Control wipes out everything, exposes all their agents, so now they have to create a new agent that can go in and stop Chaos, because Chaos is back. And Chaos is led by Terrence Stamp. That's right, General Zod from Superman 2 and Superman 1, I guess, technically. He's great in this movie. He plays Siegfried, and he is kind of a cartoony James Bond type villain. But what really makes me laugh about him is that he's a very stoic, intimidating presence in this movie, legitimately, until he has to banter and talk with his lackey, like his secondhand man Starker or Easter Island head dude. Whenever he's bantering with those guys, all of a sudden you get the sense that he is so frustrated and fed up with their incompetence that's like, why do I keep you guys around? And just the subtle sighs and eye rolls is hilarious. It's so underplayed, but that's perfect for this character. And it's really hard to explain or critique comedies because you know when a joke works or a joke lands, but it's really hard to unpack, okay, why did that land? Because that's ultimately what takes the fun out of comedy. It's the spontaneity of it that makes you laugh. But really, every joke in this movie is 100% character driven. And nothing really comes out of left field as ridiculous or cartoonish that isn't set up by a character choice or a character's personality as established early in this movie. This movie is remarkably consistent with the different styles of comedy. Because you have Steve Carell, who's very analytical, but he's also way out of his depth as he's trying to navigate the world of being an agent. A lot of the more over-the-top physical comedy moments do come from him, and they're really funny because they're in line with his character. He's gonna mess up. He's gonna do ridiculous stuff because he's trying to prove himself. And then you have characters like Anne Hathaway as Agent 99, who's trying to teach him the ropes, who's trying to not let herself get killed in the process. And you just have great comedic banter, a little bit of romance, but not too much to distract from the plot. It's actually pretty subtle how the romance does develop in this movie. They don't overplay it at all, and that could have been such a cheesy way to go with this movie. But really, it's very believable. They don't like each other at the start, and arguably Anne Hathaway really has her reservations about Max at the end, but she sees the softer side, she sees the heart behind him, and that's really what she ends up falling in love with. But a lot of these supporting actors like Anne Hathaway, Alan Arkin, The Rock, have pretty dry deliveries, very kind of sarcastic, biting humor that you don't always get from a spy movie, and is what I love about this movie, because spies are pretty dry, no-nonsense people, and yeah, it makes sense to have one character like Austin Powers or Maxwell Smart to be that goofball. You need a lot of really consistent straight men on the other side to balance that out. Because there are scenes that are played dead serious, like in the aftermath of the bakery bombing when everything blew up and now they're trying to pick up the pieces and everything seems to be looking at, oh, Max might be a double agent. Nobody can trust him. The Chief, The Rock, and Hathaway, they all play this with not an ounce of winking to the camera. They play this 100% straight. And it just makes it even funnier when the next joke is right around the corner and it becomes hilarious again. This is a movie that really knows how to pace out its humor. There are plenty of serious moments that make it feel like a legitimate spy thriller, but it never tries to overreach with that because it knows it's a comedy. It knows people are here to laugh and look at the ridiculous stuff that's going to happen. So every time a serious moment does happen, it doesn't overstay its welcome. You sit in it for a little bit, but then you know that there's going to be something really funny coming right around. And usually that just comes across in a reaction or a one-liner, just something to break the tension, and not in that really forced Marvel humor kind of way where that one-liner just breaks all the tension and you just kind of roll your eyes and be like, oh, I thought we were having a legitimate moment there and now Star-Lord just kind of botched it. Every serious or somber moment feels earned. The movie actually lets that resolve in a way that feels gratifying, like, oh, we finally cracked that code or we achieved that step and we're moving forward in the plot and we get to celebrate a little bit, and then you get the line or the joke or the setup for the next joke that just makes you fall out of your chair laughing because they just come right out of nowhere. And I'm gonna be honest, I've seen this movie probably dozens of times since it came out because this is a movie that my parents love and would be on all the time at my house. If my parents wanted just a fun comedy, they put on Get Smart because it makes them laugh every time. So of course, when I was younger, I'd watch it all the time and I'd laugh. And the first couple times you watch it, you laugh at all the big moments, the big crazy over the top stuff, like the airplane bathroom scene where Max is trying to undo his handcuffs and he's just poking himself everywhere with these darts. That's hilarious. And there's plenty of moments or sequences like that where jokes will just escalate and build on top of each other until you can't breathe, you're laughing so hard. And after seeing it so many times, those moments do still get a chuckle out of me, but what really makes me laugh are those more subtle reactions or one-liners that you don't pick up on the first few times you watch it, but the more times you watch it in true Mel Brooks fashion, like Young Frankenstein or Robin Hood Men in Tights, there's a lot of really subtle jabs and jokes and reactions that just fly over your head the first few times you watch it. So this movie has incredible rewatch value for that alone, which is why I'm shocked that nobody really talks about or reviews this movie, because it did pretty well when it came out. People seemed to like it, but around that time a lot of people were talking about how parody was dead. We had all the scary movies, epic movie, date movie, and all these other really forced and awkward parody movies that just felt like they were getting cheaper and more desperate by the day. But then comes this movie right in the midst of that disillusionment with parody that has an incredibly original take on the spy genre. That, yeah, I say original, but you know, a lot of that comes from the 60s show. But most people nowadays aren't familiar with that show anyway. So somebody watching this movie, not knowing the history, will see it and be like, oh, this is so fresh, it's funny, it's original, it's got Mel Brooks' name on it. It feels how comedies used to be in the 80s and 90s with the Leslie Nielsen Naked Gun movies and Airplane, and just that era that most people consider the golden age of parody. That is what Get Smart is. It feels like a throwback to that kind of comedy. I feel like that was very intentional by the writers and director, that they wanted this to feel like an old school parody movie with really good jokes, really interesting characters that feel not like cartoons of other spies you might have seen before, but their own standalone characters that could hold up a franchise if need be. Now I turn over to you guys. What do you think about Get Smart? Is it a movie that you saw once in the theater and haven't revisited in a little bit? Or is it a movie that you've gone back to, rewatched, and laughed even harder the second or third time you've seen it? Whatever you think, let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content, and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. As always, I'm Colby. This is my nerdy talk, and I'll see you in the next video.